What is the worst pain you've ever felt? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Flaming cooking oil spilt all down both arms. Literally melted the skin off. I worked with a line cook that was a notorious drunk years ago at a Cajun restaurant. We served fried alligator, which cost a lot to get, in North Georgia at the time, and the owner was a ball-busting penny pincher. Well, one day, this guy was drunk AF throwing gator tail into a fryer basket and a couple of pieces missed the basket. Without thinking, he reached into the fryer to grab them, and when he pulled his arm out, all of the skin just sloughed off into fryer. He passed out standing up and fell like a fresh-cut tree. Spent 10 months getting skin grafts and was never the same. Story 2. Hemorrhaging ovarian cyst. I remember being 13, watching late-night cartoons. Something popped inside me. I felt it. It hurt. I tried walking to and up the stairs to get help, but I got stuck on them and just stayed there. I couldn't yell for anybody. I didn't have a phone nearby. My grandpa happened to go pee. After about 20 minutes of me waiting on the stairs, I got his attention. I remember the car ride hurting insanely bad, and this was when they made you drink the contrast. I couldn't drink all of it, or I guess I should say hold it in, but whatever I got in was just enough. The radiologist said they were able to watch the cyst fully empty on imaging. I don't think I've ever had pain like that before in my life, and I'm almost 27. Story 3. I have endometriosis, so I've been used to living with severe pain. But one night when I wasn't on my period, I woke up with severe cramps. I thought my endo was just going through a weird flare-up. But the pain got worse. I started vomiting and started blacking out on the way to the bathroom. I was laying in the fetal position on the bathroom floor, frozen from pain. Still thought it was just my endometriosis. But then the pain lingered for about 5 days after. And every movement hurt. I could barely move for 5 days straight. I finally was able to schedule an ultrasound, and they said I had a large ovarian cyst that ruptured, and they could see the shell of it still, and my pelvic area was still full of the fluid. Worst pain ever. Story 4. An abscessed tooth. I was ready to rip the thing out of my head all by myself. That scene in Castaway where Tom Hanks' character used the rock and the ice skate blade to knock his own tooth out looked pretty attractive. Edit. I want to add, if this happens to you, you should not try to yank it out yourself. There is something called referred pain. Basically, your nerves lie to you and you feel pain somewhere other than the source of the infection. You could pull a completely wrong tooth. Story 5. Appointment booked for a GP tomorrow morning just to confirm all the associated pain is in fact tooth related, so I can tell the dentist what's what. Considering private dental, but live near a hospital with a dental ward, so I feel safe enough to hold off one more night. I have a toothache near it that's unrelated. At times I'll tap it on purpose just to like. My nerves are basically a CPU. 100% of the pain receptors are in use, I feel. Causing a second source of pain will sap half of the pain away from the main pain for a short period. This paragraph is a joke. The first one is not. Story 6. There's no escaping that kind of pain. I was slamming my head into the wall to knock myself out at one point. I had lost my job during the 2008 recession and there was no money for dental work. Finally found a place that would rip it out for a small fee off a sliding scale. By the time I had it drained, the infection grew to the size of a chicken nugget under my jaw. I was really close to just grabbing pliers myself and yanking it. Story 7. Cluster headache. Mine went untreated for years. When I finally got a sumatriptan prescription, it was life-changing, even though at 6 doses a month I had to pick which headaches to treat. I get crazy active and long clusters. 15 plus headache days a month for 2 to 4 months. I hoard sumatriptan in the non-cluster months. I still have a dent in my left temple though from grinding my knuckle into it to try and distract myself from the pain. The number of times I've hurt myself trying to take my mind off it for even a minute. Story 8. The back of my eyeball and optic nerve waking up after emergency retina cryopexy, triggering a massive migraine that felt like I had a spike through my eye and into my brain. It was absolute raw, unabashed, curled up with my head between my knees crying and screaming. Had to keep facing down because of the gas bubble injected into my eyeball to keep the retina in place. 2. Story 9. A rupturing ectopic pregnancy. I can't describe the pain because my brain shut off due to the severity of it. I remember when I woke up from surgery, the DRS told me they'd had to restart my heart twice and I had a lot of internal bleeding. Oh, and I lost part of my fallopian tube. They intubated me, so when I did come to, I was gagging and they had to take it out. When they did, they hit my vocal cords and I had a very husky voice for about a year. The whole situation sucked. The pregnancy was due to sexual abuse while serving in the Marines. I'm still fighting for justice 14 years later. Story 10. Post-biopsy for osteosarcoma, bone cancer, in my femur. After waking up from the biopsy, they picked my leg up to slide an x-ray pad under it, and the bone just shattered instantly as the tumor had deteriorated the bone to the point where the biopsy needle caused the whole structure to collapse. Without a doubt, the most 11 out of 10 pain imaginable. Story 11. Kidney stones. Remember that scene on Alien when that thing ripped out of the people's torsos? Yep, that's what I compare it to because that is what it felt like. I have slipped a disc in my back, cut my leg with an axe so deep I hit the fibula and broke a piece off of the bone, internal bleeding from complications of a vasectomy, and had kidney stones. The kidney stones were exponentially worse than any of the others. No comparison. Story 12. 14 years old, getting silently escorted to the principal's office to be told that my first real and best friend had been hit by a car and killed that morning. I have gone through a lifetime of physical pain, but nothing even comes close to the sundering of my heart that day. I'm 36 now, and I still cry for her and who she could have been. I will carry her and my hurt for the rest of my life. Story 13. Testicular torsion. Imagine getting kicked in the balls, then multiply that by 1,000. If I moved my legs at all, I would feel like a horse was kicking me in my balls. And the craziest part? My balls were not fully twisted, so that crap gets even worse if it fully twists closed. And if you wait too long, you risk losing a nut. The morphine was amazing though. Story 14. Funny enough, a period of constipation. I've had multiple gunshot wounds twice in my life. I've been set on fire, hit by cars, and all the fun of growing up in the 80-90s. Not being able to pass a poop takes the cake by far. Not even in the same league as anything else. There was one moment when I was a teenager where I had an upset gut, but my body wouldn't move it. It was uncomfortable at first, but by the end of the 4th day, and I genuinely would have taken death if it was offered. I was in the ER and morphine was not touching the pain. Story 15. I have had pretty extensive sinus surgery, and about 3 days after surgery, I was trying to brush my extremely tangled hair. I was kind of disoriented because you have to do these really painful and long saline rinses or the packing in your nose will harden and cause issues. So anyways, I slipped and hit myself in the nose with the hairbrush. In almost tears, I grabbed the scissors from the counter and cut the rat's nest out of my hair and went and lied back down. I just had the worst migraine and pain afterwards. To this day, if I touch the bridge of my nose just right, I get this disgusting visceral reaction like there is some scar tissue there or something. It's between that or my IUD. The insertion wasn't terrible, but the cramps. My God. My fiancé is a first responder, and he admitted to me a couple years later that he was close to making me go to the ER. The pain was nuts. People who have reached a 9 or 10 on the pain scale, what happened? Story 1. Bacterial meningitis. My brain felt like a contained explosion that was trapped reverberating in my skull, but it wanted out and constantly let me know about it. Had bacterial meningitis when I was 4, and while I don't remember the pain, I remember sleeping the entire day and not moving. When my mom got home and saw that I still didn't move from when she came home at lunch, she rushed me to the hospital. I lost my hearing in my right ear and partially in my left. I also had to learn to walk and talk again. The doctor told my mom that if she had brought me just an hour later, I would have died. I'm now 28 and really grateful to have survived that. Story 2. Had a CAT scan at 36. They gave me 4 contrast fluid. Told me I might feel like I had to pee, no big deal, make sure to hold still. Put me in the machine. Within a minute, I started feeling warm. As they started the scan, I started breathing heavily. Then I started screaming. It felt like my entire body was on fire, every nerve. They were confused and freaked out. Got me out and sitting up, but it wasn't until a nurse gave me a shot of Benadryl that I started feeling better. Turns out I had a full-body internal allergic reaction to the contrast media, which contained iodine. Never happened before. Worst feeling of my life. Story 3. I have thankfully been exceedingly lucky in not gravely injuring myself. However, the most egregious amount of pain I've ever been in was getting stung by a stingray. Wasn't paying attention and moving quickly through shallow ocean and felt a slice. I thought I'd stepped on glass, but by the time I got out of the water the pain was so intense I couldn't even think. Felt like someone put my foot in a blender. I got treated quickly and thankfully did not go through the peak of it. For future reference, submerge affected area in the hottest water you can stand without burning yourself. Story 4. Ovarian cyst burst. This happened to me when I was like 12. Screaming on the toilet and then more screaming when my mom tried to pull me off to take me to the hospital. I couldn't even move. Good news was my math teacher wasn't mean to me anymore when I went back to school afterwards and she heard what happened, LOL. Ovarian cysts are rough. Story 5. Tried to give birth vaginally, and after hours of labor and hours of pushing, something felt horribly wrong. Then it felt like the worst pain imaginable. Ended up having an emergency C-section, but something went wrong with the drugs and I could feel the incision. My uterus had literally burst. After closing, the doctor was checking to make sure my uterus was solid and it had multiple other tears. I almost bled out. The doctor cried, telling my boyfriend what had happened. Story 6. Trigeminal neuralgia. It feels like every bone and tooth in my face has been crushed and shattered. I've got a high pain tolerance from a lifetime of nerve damage from scoliosis, but TN pain had me truly wishing for the relief of death. Absolutely nothing gave me any relief whatsoever, and I was begging to just be sedated. Story 7. I have TN as well. It's so difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced that pain what it feels like. It's also one of those invisible things, or what to call it, so more often than not, people assume I exaggerate how painful it is. It's a nightmare and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Not knowing when it'll flare up or what will trigger the pain makes life unbearable at times. In my case, no meds or anything has helped. It's basically a you have to learn with this type of situation. Story 8. Molar infection. The pain was so intense I had to control myself to just not curl in a ball and cry. I had to take antibiotics for a week and then extract the tooth. It's like the most intense nerve pain ever, but it doesn't stop. No thinking, no sleeping, only the pain. Now I say I no longer am afraid of death, since death can be a release from pain, LOL. Story 9. I had sudden molar pain the week of the first lockdown. My dentist was so upset that he would have been able to fix it easily, but he wasn't legally allowed to open. After a few nights of pain, I went to A&E, but the doctor wouldn't see me as it was a dental issue. I second what you said about not thinking, sleeping, etc. It was all-consuming, wretched pain. I was in a terrible state. My dentist referred me to the only emergency dentist in the county who just extracted the offending tooth. I don't think I've ever felt such relief. Story 10. Fractured my hip and had to keep wrecking 12 miles with 65 pounds on my back. I bawled my eyes out the whole time, and another person was lifting the back of my ruck up to help take the weight off, but it is still the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Note, I wasn't allowed to leave the ruck or drop the weight. My DS said I wouldn't get credit for the ruck and would be recycled if I didn't carry my ruck. Note 2, my company was still using the large Malt 2 rucks with both side pouches. Story 11. Hit by a car, leg got pinned in front of the wheel and it basically ate away my ankle. First sobering moment in my life when I picked up my leg and my ankle went at a 90-degree angle. I was 9 at the time and knew I had messed up big time. 11 surgeries, 2 months in the hospital, 8 months bed rest later, I can say I still have my leg, most of it. Story 12. Rheumatoid arthritis. My knees had been so inflamed that I wasn't able to bend them for about a year. Had to learn to use the toilet standing up, even number 2. Anyway, one day I started to stumble, and I caught myself by automatically bending my knee to stabilize and not fall. It was like a gunshot. I passed out and woke up in a puddle of vomit. No idea how long I was out. Thankfully, I was on carpet and didn't hit my head on the way down. I've had 2 children and I've passed 3 large kidney stones. This pain was beyond all that. But it didn't linger. Worst I ever felt, by far, but only for seconds. Story 13. I took a bullet to my left knee. I was shooting some targets with a buddy, and one of the shots, I was closer than I should have been, bounced back into my knee. First I was confused, then the pain set in. Imagine a baseball bat with a red-hot nail in the end, swung as hard as someone can into your knee. Worst pain I ever felt. I can't imagine being shot and not have it be a ricochet into the organs. It's the worst pain I ever felt. I now have no cartilage in my knee. It hurts every day, clicks and aches all the time. Story 14. Penile foreskin got stuck in my pants zipper. I was about 5 years old and had forgot to wear my underwear beneath. After taking a quick piss, I zipped up in a rush, not putting my penis inside fully. Outcome was the most painful pain I have ever experienced. The worst part was when I was taken to the hospital. No anesthesia was given and doctors simply pulled that crap out of the zipper with brute force. Story 15. Sleeping and both my legs spazzed out at the same time. Like the entire leg. Calf, quads, hamstrings, feet tendons, everything. Lasted like 20 minutes straight, and it's probably nothing compared to some of these things under the comment, but the best way I could describe it is it was like my body just randomly decided to tear off my legs muscle, one by one, piece by piece, little by little, and for no reason. What the most painful procedure, ailment, virus, disease you have ever experienced? Story 1. Gallstones. I went through a 2-year ordeal with breast cancer, including chemo, blood transfusions, radiation, and 3 surgeries. My gallbladder attack was still the most painful. My gallbladder just decided to stop working. Docs never figured out why. The day my gallbladder stopped was worse than passing a kidney stone. I thought at the time I was passing a kidney stone. Turned out it was the day my gallbladder stopped working. After that day, my health went downhill fast. Anything I tried to eat, my body would respond to it like I had food poisoning. Went on for months before DRS figured out what was wrong. Never figured out why though. I have had sinus surgery and kidney stones, but I think my gallbladder dying has been the worst so far. Story 2. Leukemia. Chemo was not fun, but I was extremely lucky and went into remission almost immediately. 20 years later, happy and healthy. My wife was diagnosed last year and was in remission after her 2nd round of chemo. I remember her saying the bone marrow biopsies or spinals were the worst. I'm glad you're still with us 20 years later. Reading this really gave me a sigh of relief that you've stayed healthy, for her health is always on my mind. Too many more years. Story 3. My tailbone fractured spontaneously while I was sitting in a hard auditorium chair during a school assembly. I was 14. Had to sit through the rest of the assembly and walk home that day, with my backpack banging against my lower back. In the rain. You can't do crap for a broken tailbone. 20 years later, it still hurts. Story 4. Alcohol withdrawals. Shaking, vomiting, weakness, tired but can't sleep, cold sweats, hallucinations, and feeling like you're losing your mind all simultaneously. Luckily, I made it through a few times. Going on 1 year sober after a relapse after 5 years sober, followed by food poisoning. Story 5. A ruptured ovarian cyst. I got to the ER and promptly threw up at the nurse's check-in station from the pain. Nurse had a bag she pulled out so quickly she probably has to do it all the time. I had that happen, too. I was 15, and I got up to get ready for school, but as I was getting ready, a cyst burst and I collapsed on the bathroom floor in pain. My mom took me to the ER and I was diagnosed with POS shortly after. The only thing that's topped that pain is contractions without pain relief during giving birth. Story 6. I have trigeminal neuralgia, aka the suicide disease, as the pain used to drive people to kill themselves to stop the pain. It primarily gives you painful electric shock on the face, TN1, but also can feel like you are being stabbed, burnt, sliced, too hot, too cold, ants crawling, like something is stuck in your teeth, and other lovely things that a damaged nerve can come up with, TN2. I've had a surgery to place a Teflon pad between the nerve and the blood vessel that was rubbing the nerve raw, which has stopped the shocks. But as the nerve is now damaged, the TN2 persists, and I am on a cocktail of anti-epileptic drugs. I can't take the usual drug for TN, and I have an arsenal of painkillers. If it gets too bad, I have to head to hospital for 4 painkillers. Story 7. Shingles. Don't let anyone tell you it's only for the elderly. I had it at 19. Sucked bad. I would randomly burst into tears from the nerve pain, and there was nothing at all that helped. Shingles in my ear. I've had shingles 3 times, and make no mistake, they were all horrible, but the first time having shingles in my ear made me legitimately wish someone would come into my house and shoot me dead. And it was during the happiest point in my life. Runners-up were my first miscarriage, the first bowel movement after a level 4 episiotomy, and a twisted ovary that ruptured. Edit, the cyst on my ovary ruptured. Not my ovary. But it was also twisted. Story 8. I suffered an internal decapitation. I was an MMA fighter. Turned out I had bone cancer in my neck, C3 shattered while training. The surgery that saved my life removed C2, C4, and a vertebral artery. Was pretty brutal. The biopsies were horrible too, as they were sampling the tumor on my spinal cord, chordoma. Crazy thing was I walked around and worked for about 2 months with C3 shattered. It felt like a muscular injury in my neck, too dumb to realize I was near death at the time. Story 9. Had a bone spur, about the size of a quarter, digging into my spinal cord. Took 6 months to get it diagnosed. RT leg was numb and LT leg was going numb. I was burning through pain meds like Sheeklets. Towards the end, before surgery, I just said to talk to my wife. I couldn't think clearly. She was making all the decisions. Instant relief when I woke up. I had to ask the doctor what the problem was and what was done. Story 10. Migraine. I know it's not a fatal issue, but let me tell you, the other week one clobbered me so hard I was screaming. We went to the ER after I couldn't stop vomiting. When I got to how painful was it? On the 1 to 10 scale, I told them I take that scale seriously. I said I hit 8, whereas I reserve 9 and 10 for dismemberment. Usually I can head them off, sorry for pun, with Relpax/elatriptan. That RX is incredible. But sometimes I don't have the RX with me, or the nausea kicks in too fast to take the pill. Just sucks. Story 11. I had a particularly traumatic spinal tap. The pain during the tap was so excruciating that I pissed myself and passed out. The headache afterward was so bad I couldn't sleep. The brain MRI the day after with that headache was so debilitating that I contemplated suicide. The headache lasted 7 days. I spent 7 days laying in my bed in complete and utter agony until it went away. I will never get another spinal tap again, even if it's the only way to save my life. I, true earnest, would rather die. Story 12. Double middle ear infection. It was excruciating. Every sound felt like I was being stabbed in the head. It went on for 8 to 9 days before I could get antibiotics. My hearing has been noticeably worse since. I got a double middle ear infection and strep throat in the Bahamas. I had a 103 degrees fever and I was in so much pain. The doctors told my parents it wasn't safe to fly, but they refused to change our tickets and told me that we would get it looked at when we got home. The flight was the most excruciating thing I've ever felt. Every time I swallowed, it felt like I was being stabbed in both eardrums. I screamed and cried. There was no relief and no escape. I ended up rupturing both eardrums, and my hearing has never been the same. Story 13. A particularly nasty period when I was in high school sent me to the ER on a morphine drip. So definitely that. Close second would be my IUD insertions. I'd like to be clear, though, that I love my IUD and don't regret it for a second. I haven't had a period in 5 years because of them, and I feel like I've been given a new lease on life. Story 14. Ovarian torsion for me. It's when your ovary twists around, caused by a cyst in my case. Blood flow to the ovary is cut off and the ovary begins to die. Ovaries have the same nerve endings testicles do, so the nurses equated the pain I was experiencing to what a man would feel if his balls were twisted around and then wrapped tightly in a rubber band. It's by far the worst pain I've ever experienced, and my body's been through some crap. Story 15. I was injured in a bomb blast, random terror attack. Had shrapnels all over my body, over 100 scars. Lost a foot and eardrum. That wasn't the most painful part. The most painful part was the procedure. Hospital didn't have anesthetics. Had to operate on me to save my life while I was awake. I wish I was dead back then. After that, I got addicted to drugs for pain, OD'd many times, also had kidney stones and other side effects. Currently trying to get sober again. Been over 10 years now. What's something that's painfully obvious but people will never admit? Story 1. Some people will not like you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Trying to force a friendship or relationship with someone who doesn't love you back isn't going to work. Yet very few people ever learn this lesson, nor do they want to hear about it either. They think they'll be the one person that can find that magic trick. They won't. Story 2. Nobody really knows you. Everybody just has their own perception of you, and that perception is you for them. Think about it. Like there kind of exists as many versions of you as there are observers, and the real deal, the one you are experiencing and breathing, is never seen as a whole by anyone. It might sound depressing for some, for me it's the opposite. That thought frees me. I cannot control what everybody else are thinking about me. I cannot convince anybody to see me as I do. The only thing that matters is who I am and how I act. Story 3. Humans hate to admit to feeling jealous, yet it's usually very clear to those around you. From my perspective, when I've reflected on my own moments of jealousy, I hate feeling it because it's completely irrational. Every single time. It's illogical. It can foster ingratitude for your own good fortunes. It can hold you back. And I think people so rarely admit to it because it's a stupid emotion to feel, yet still it happens. Story 4. Everybody picks their nose. It's what happens next that sets us apart. OMG. I was on a flight and saw this drop-dead gorgeous woman in a business suit sit a few rows in front of me. I was trying to sleep with my head against the bulkhead, and at one point I saw her hiding her head in the crack too with a pillow or something, and she was picking her nose. She'd slowly pick one, examine it carefully, and then eat it. When we were disembarking, I kind of wanted her to know that I knew her secret, but I couldn't do it. Story 5. Boredom is healthy for promoting thinking. I've had a few jobs with lots of downtime that didn't allow phones. My coworkers would complain. I would just pace and make up stories in my head. I have ADHD, though, so daydreams are a way of life for me. Shower. Vivid daydream. Falling asleep. Basically a movie running through my head. Long drive. Time to tell myself a story. Brain's gotta be doing something at all times. The only downside is that I have to be careful that I don't accidentally speak the words in the story. It's awkward when someone walks into a room and you're mumbling dialogue to yourself. Story 6. Adults still have no idea what they are doing. I never knew that as a child. This was a really hard realization for me when I was younger. Though they had all the answers. Was a big wake-up call when I realized everyone is just doing their best the only way they know how. Most are just making it up as they go. Story 7. You might not like it, but you need help. Everyone needs help at some point or another, whether mentally, emotionally, or otherwise. Most of us are painfully aware of the need at some time, but admitting to it and acting on that need goes unheeded. Story 8. If you work hard, the guy who works smarter will probably beat you and make it look easy. Work smarter. My policy is, there is an easier way to do anything, you just have to find it. Some might disagree, but it's gotten me quite far, and I don't intend on stopping. Story 9. People in power, politicians, the rich, etc., don't give two crap about you or your troubles. None of them will change your life. I'm neither and have my own troubles to deal with. Edit, I am usually caring to neighbors and friends. 2 jobs to pay for my wife's cancer bills while also trying to raise our 2 kids because she's in the hospital kind of saps your time and energy. Story 10. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. There's this but from the Louis C.K. show that I see get posted all the time. Something like, if someone tells you you hurt them, you don't get to decide that you didn't. So many people believe that if they're bothered or offended, it means someone else did something wrong. Parenthood should cure most people of that belief. I make my kid cry all the time. Usually stuff like, no, you can't have just ice cream for dinner. He's so hurt, so betrayed, so offended that I won't let him do it, but that doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. Story 11. People making conversation just for the atmosphere to not be awkward. It's okay to have silence, but in a close-knit area like a car/sauna, people will just generate random small talk conversation for effectively no reason at all, which makes everyone psychologically more awkward and uncomfortable. Sometimes silence is fine, guys. And also awkward-eyed glances, etc. just be natural. Story 12. NFL refs are gambling. Too many obvious blown calls missed in the last few seasons. NFL has their own Donaghy situation. Maybe, but the game is really fast. Mistakes happen. The refs are also human and make mistakes, usually to my team's detriment. I'm a Lions fan, by the way, and just went through the Brad Allen debacle, among many others through the years. A solution to me would be to make it transparent like the XFL and UHFL did. Or UFL now, whatever they are calling it now. And have cameras rolling and mics on while they discuss a call. Story 13. That the next few decades are going to be a living age for the majority of people on this planet. What we're experiencing at the moment in terms of freak weather, inequality, and economic and political instability are just the start, and we're going to look back on this period as relatively easy living compared to just about every educated projection of what the future holds for us. Story 14. Most people that talk about politics are not an expert and don't know 100% what they're talking about. Probably not even near 100%. Or even 50%. Including me. Including you. That's why I try not to have too strong opinions. Sometimes I fail, but you know I try. It'd be nice to be more active and knowledgeable in the world and in my country, but I feel like it takes more than a few Google searches and news articles to understand the subject. Story 15. I was obese because my hormones were messed from constant trauma spanning 15 years and wouldn't come off regardless of diet or exercise. LOL, but I'm going to throw my hat in here and add to the thread. What's painfully obvious but most people don't get, your staunch opinions on other people's weight is solely based on your own insecurities. Take it from someone who beat obesity, it's not just diet and exercise, people are going through it. You don't need to make it harder by being crap about it. What is the worst physical pain you have ever experienced? Story 1. About 14 years ago, I decided to get my tonsils out. My ENT noticed how closed up my sinus passages were and before the surgery asked if I'd like them opened up as well. Sure. Let's get it all done. Recovery was okay. About 3 months later, I started getting a headache. Within 24 hours, I was pretty much immobilized from the pain and kept a warm compress over my eyes to keep the light out. I went back to my specialist. He said you have a migraine and prescribed Vicodin or Percocet. When that didn't do anything to help the pain, even doubling the dose, I called my ENT back. He said go to the ER, but in that tone that says, "You big baby." They stuck something in my arm, I passed out, and woke up feeling great. Next morning I looked like someone punched me in the eye. Went back to my ENT, and he showed me the scan they took in the ER. I had such a severe sinus infection I was fit to burst. He was very apologetic for basically brushing off my concern. Story 2. I had severe breast pain from my cancer that grew rapid and fast. Worst pain I ever experienced. I felt so much relief when during my first round of chemo and pain disappeared within 2 days. So worth it. I am doing a lot better now and the cancer disappeared in my breast. I took barely any pain meds for my surgeries because they were nothing. There is a chance I am NED or NEAD. Story 3. The day before I started first grade, I accidentally sliced a deep cut through my hand that nearly severed my pinky entirely. I actually didn't even register it right away because the knife cut through the nerve on that side of the hand. The worst pain wasn't the cut itself, but sticking my hand in the disinfecting solution in the ER was a feeling similar to my entire hand being set on fire. Story 4. I had abdominal surgery, search RPLND, for cancer 10 years ago. There is a scar that goes from my crotch to just below my sternum where they took all my guts out, extracted the tumors, and put my guts back in. About 8 hours after surgery, pumped full of drugs, I decided to go for a walk. I used the bed control to seat myself upright, used my 4-dolly as support to get out of bed, then carefully, like a bent-over geriatric, shuffled my way to the door. See, the trick was to support myself as much as possible with my lower back and keep my abdomen out of it. And it worked for a few steps until the vertigo hit me. I lurched forward and tensed. And then I felt my intestines settle, the hemispheres of my abdomen strain against the internal stitches, the two halves sort of float independently, and every layer of skin rip against the staples. I basically got to feel a nice little sample of evisceration, and there was no amount of narcotic numbness that could stop pain that deep. Truly, I empathize with William Wallace. It wasn't fun. So I puked blood, which didn't feel nice, shuffled my way back to bed, and hit the drug button. Story 5. Trigeminal neuralgia. It's very hard to describe TN to people that don't have it, but I think this is probably my best way of describing it. The anesthetic injection that's administered by your dentist often feels like an electric bolt going up your nose into your eye socket. Well, imagine this pain starting anywhere in your gums, mouth, tongue, or teeth, then traveling through your cheekbone and out of your head over and over again for minutes at a time before subsiding for anything from a minute to minutes, leaving an intense burning and throbbing, pins and needles sensation before it begins all over again. It's relentless. Story 6. Having my eye removed. It was horrible. It really didn't hurt until the next morning, then OMG, it burnt, stung, and hurt, but it didn't last long. In order to get a replacement, I had to go to Pittsburgh for an 8-hour app where they go through a bunch of things to make it fit correct. And the man I went to actually hand-painted my eye. The worst part of it was good morning the loss of my eye, trying to be able to judge distances, and so on. Story 7. Being on fire. I screamed like a wounded animal. You could probably hear me from miles away. I almost fought a nurse when she wasn't going to give me more morphine. Mine honestly wasn't that bad, just flash fire from gasoline. I was 20. I had second-degree burns on my face, but I don't have any scarring. Some of these stories under me are pretty horrific, and having been there, I'm so sorry to every one of them. I don't think I would have been in more pain if I had been more burned, even. I just would have had the same pain in more areas, if that makes sense. Story 8. Testicular torsion. It is as painful as it sounds. Imagine someone kicking you directly in the balls, and continuing to kick you in the balls every other minute. And if a doctor doesn't perform surgery within a few hours, you lose your testicle. Edit. For any guys reading, if it helps, it happens randomly and cannot really be prevented, usually to teens, but also adults. If ever you have a persistent and very sharp testicular or lower abdomen pain, seemingly out of nowhere, for me it was during a normal morning after breakfast, don't wait around more than an hour and go straight to emergency. Story 9. I have endometriosis. My pain sometimes is so bad that I will beg my husband to knock me out, or I'll punch my legs because it somehow makes it less painful than my pelvis if I inflict pain somewhere else. I've had 4 major surgeries in 10 years and will likely need 1 more at some point. Some people think it's just painful periods, but it's not. I've been fully disabled 24/7 by the pain and other symptoms for years at a time. Because it is a female disease, no one really does much research on it, even though 10% of the female population has it. Story 10. Ingrowing toenail on my big toe in high school. Was really hoping it would fix itself and let it get worse and worse over quite some time. Eventually went to the GP, who said he had a great solution, showing me a piece of a BIC pen where he cut through one side, creating a C-shaped little tube about half a centimeter long. He grabbed my foot, held it near the nail, and before I had registered what was about to happen, he stated, "Someone's gonna scream," and jammed it on my toe, through the flesh. I was not able to sit still for an hour and had to keep moving around or the pain would be too overwhelming. It helped and the toe healed, but never again. Story 11. Shingles. Shingles is when a nerve is infected by the same virus that causes chicken pox. Most people are lucky enough to get the infection closer to the skin, which produces a burning, itchy rash. I got it at the nerve root, right next to my spine, under my shoulder blade. Searing waves of pain that nothing could take down. They handed me a retroviral prescription and told me to come back if it's not gone in 6 weeks. Story 12. Pancreatitis. Easily. I've broken my face. Literally half my jaw broke off and was hanging on my cheek. Yeah, that hurt. But it was absolutely nothing compared to pancreatitis. That's the organ that scares the crap out of me and will probably be the literal death of me, cause mine is pretty weak, and if something goes wrong with it like cancer, it is 100% death. But pancreatitis is when it freaks out and leaks digestive juices that start eating your insides. And that is exactly what it feels like. Crippling, crying, pleading for release type pain. Not fun. Story 13. Had my hands crushed a few years ago. The bone under my pinky finger in my right hand was broken and turned back. The female doc just had nurses hold me down and manually set it with no painkillers. Took 20 minutes. I screamed louder than any of the times I gave birth. I wanted to punch that crap. Never got any pain meds for after either, and she was pissed it took so long. Never paid the bill and cut the cast off myself when it was time. Story 14. I got hit by a golf cart at a work tournament and pinned between it and another golf cart. I thought for sure I had broken my leg, but I just had some ligament damage. It took me a second to realize what happened. My first thought was, did I actually just get hit by a golf cart? And then the pain set in. The guy driving was not intoxicated. He had never driven a golf cart before that day and didn't realize that they didn't slow down like cars do if you release the gas pedal. It kept driving and he panicked. Story 15. Epididymitis. A UTI spread, and before the antibiotics finally began to work, yeah, it was MRSA, my left testicle had swollen to the size of a baseball. And, cracked/split. Also, the infection spread before it was finally controlled and eventually defeated, causing nerve damage to my left sciatic nerve and my vagus nerve. So, hips don't work as they used to, chronic pain, and a physical sense of anxiety all the time from the damaged vagus. The pain level during the worst of the swelling was as close to suicide as I have been. I do not recommend it. Also, bodies are stupid. What's an indescribable pain? Story 1. Rib pops out of your spine and wedges under your shoulder blade. I wished for death. When my rib number 2 dislocated and basically didn't pop back in. Got to the doctor, who stood up on a 2-step ladder, put me in a half Nelson and jumped off. Immediately said to me he's too old to do that crap anymore. LOL. He said there's only really 2 ways to do the injury, starting a lawnmower or punching the air. I did it punching the air, telling a story whilst sitting around a campfire in the middle of nowhere after 10 beers. Fun times. Story 2. Having a tooth infection so bad that it points your other teeth in different directions because of the swelling. Toothaches are a category of their own as far as discomfort caused goes. Once they're bad enough, you can't eat, drink, sleep, or even think clearly. And getting rid of them can be painful, take time, and be expensive. 0 out of 10 do not recommend poor dental hygiene. Story 3. Stage 4 metastatic cancer involving lungs, throat, and lymph nodes. Bonus pain from fractured lower spine and concurrent kidney stones. I hate the way fentanyl, OxyContin, and Dilaudid make me feel. Sometimes, I feel that it would be better to put my Glock in my mouth. Screw cancer. Update: this was a really bad day for me. Some days are worse than others. Thank you for the many kind words. Story 4. Cluster headaches. Imagine waking up at 2 a.m. feeling a little funny. Then 15 minutes later, it feels like someone dropped a red-hot metal ball right in the middle of your skull. It hurts to breathe. It hurts to move. It hurts to sit up and go take medicine. It hurts to cry. Everything you do causes an incredible supernova of pain. Imagine a Charlie horse in your head that doesn't stop for hours. You spend hours curled up in bed in severe pain every night during your episodic period, anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks, trying to not move or breathe. If you're lucky enough to wake up before the full onset and take medicine, then it's just a bad migraine. I've broken my collarbone, 2 ribs, and tweaked a vertebrae during a motorcycle crash. I would take that any day over a single night of cluster headaches. Story 5. Sciatic nerve pain. I had a slip disc for 3 years. The pain got worse and worse, but they refused to operate on me until I lost continence. Well, once the surgery was over, I had a 12-inch scar up my spine and was told that I'd need a week in bed before physical therapy, as it was so bad. Yeah, no. Same day, I was up and interacting with the PT people because the pain of surgery was almost non-existent compared to that sciatic nerve pain. Story 6. Gout, especially if it's a major acute attack. That crap hurts so bad it's made me want to chop my foot off with a rusty axe if that would make it feel better. Also, the systemic inflammation with gout is a bitch too. Gout is the worst pain I've ever experienced. Hands down. I've had abscessed teeth, deep cuts, sprains, and breaks. None of it comes close to the pure agony of a bad gout flare-up. Like you said, I'd have let someone chop my leg off. Story 7. Gallbladder attacks before you know what they are and how to lessen them. It started as this empty, hungry feeling that got worse, then morphed into a pain that makes you pray for death. I've given birth unmedicated twice and would do it a third time if my other option was a gallbladder attack. Sweats, vomiting, weird animals' groans. I even said, "I'm dying, call my mommy," at one point. I don't even have one anymore and haven't in over a decade, but I still get nervous when hunger sneaks up on me and I feel empty. Story 8. The absence of pain where one knows pain should be. I broke my fibula and my collarbone and felt no pain. I felt this almost sickening absence of pain. Those who have experienced trauma or shock know what I'm talking about. Story 9. Due to how far along she was at the time, my ex had to carry her miscarried baby to term. She gave birth to what can only be described as parts of our child. There are no words that can describe how I felt at the time, and it wasn't even happening to me. I can't even get myself to the level where I can imagine what she was going through. Story 10. Having fingernails bend awkwardly and acutely backward in the middle, but strangely not break. It happened to several, on both hands climbing up something. It's all I can do to keep from puking thinking about it as I write this. That is the best way to describe that unique pain. Story 11. Violently vomiting frequently for days after getting your tonsils removed. I can't adequately describe how the pain felt, but the closest I could come is imagine taking a wad of sandpaper, covering it in Japalino oil, attaching it to a drill, lighting it on fire, shoving it down your throat, and then turning the drill on. It was awful in so many ways, especially with dehydration setting in. Story 12. Getting stabbed. And not like I poked/cut myself because the insert food item here slipped. I took a 4-inch folding knife to my side in my early 20s, and it was left in there until the paramedics showed up. I work in restaurants and have cut/burned/injured myself in ways most people wouldn't think. I've broken bones, had infections, I got shingles at 18. Nothing will ever compare to the feeling of a solid steel foreign object breaking through your skin and around with your insides while you try not to move, even though all your entire body wants to do is convulse. Story 13. Having to pull a tooth in your bathroom sink at 4 a.m. with pliers because no emergency dentist can see you for at least 8 more hours. Tooth had broken in half vertically, leaving a void in the gum and a jagged, sharp-edged lump of smashed tooth still rooted into my jaw. The pain was so bad with this intense throbbing that I actually couldn't see properly. My head was feeling like it was going to burst, and the shooting pains in my jaw were beyond agony. I did what I could to sterilize some small pliers, went and stood in front of the bathroom mirror and wrenched that crap out of there. Unimaginable pain, nerve still intact in the root of the tooth, so much blood, but indescribable and immediate relief the second it was out. I've never been so happy to see blood pouring out of my own mouth. Packed the area of my mouth with gauze and waited till the dentist was in. Never again. Story 14. Cliché but childbirth. I knew it would hurt, seeing it happen enough in movies and TV and in real life with friends and family giving me all the gory details of birthing a human, but nothing prepares you for what contractions, back labor, and pushing the kid out actually feels like. Nothing adequately describes the pain, and it's so bad it traumatized me into forgetting most of it. For months after I had my son, still, sometimes, now a year later, I get this pain like someone is tightening screws that are already too tight into my lower spine. It is almost debilitating. It's brought me to tears and made me physically sick before. And it's like 1/10 of the pain of a contraction. Story 15. Severe lower back pain, specifically from a pulled/spasming muscle. It doesn't matter how many people tell you how awful it is, nothing can prepare you for it, and how it takes you 20 minutes to get out of your bed and walk the 10 steps to go to the toilet. Even on strong medication, it's still agony if you move the wrong way and it spasms again. The pain isn't even the worst part, it's realizing how much you took your mobility and independence for granted. Simple tasks like getting dressed or wiping your arse take so much more effort and preparation than you ever realized. What beloved comedy TV show or movie do you find painfully unfunny? Story 1. If you're scrolling through the comments, I can save you some time. Pretty much every comment is that they hate Big Bang Theory and Friends. Also quite a few hate How I Met Your Mother. I feel like hating BBT has just become a hip thing to say on here. While it's no masterpiece, it's a decent sitcom that at least did something different and was put together well / had some good actors with good chemistry. I think the fact that it pokes fun at nerd culture is a huge hot button for some, but it is a bit hypocritical given that pretty much all sitcoms poke fun at their protagonists, like socialites in Frasier or New Yorkers in Seinfeld. I mean, if you aren't into sitcoms or it just wasn't for you, I get it. But pretending like it was the same quality as the plethora of one-season shovelware sitcoms we get every year is disingenuous at best. Story 2. I used to tell my kids about an old show that was hilarious, Get a Life, from back in the early 80s. Found a VHS, popped it in, and silence ensues. Did not age well. I remember as a kid seeing this, and it was funny. I was recently thinking about it and found it online. I think I got through the first episode and couldn't imagine that there'd be more that I need to see. Story 3. I absolutely hate Family Feud. This is because in literally every episode, if any contestant says something even a little weird or unusual, Steve Harvey sits there with his jaw on the floor absolutely gobsmacked that somebody would say something like that. It may have been funny the first few episodes, but by episode 977, it gets pretty old. Story 4. Tried watching Two Broke Girls on a Plane and I was losing it. So boring. I feel like the pitch went there's the sassy one and the ditzy one, and it'll kinda be like Clueless meets Mean Girls set in a diner like Seinfeld. What's not to like? And then it was none of that. I started watching it with my GF and I was enduring it. It even had some moments, but what turned me off was that at some point I was busy doing something and could only hear the audio while my GF watched. It was terrible. All scenes were like this: one-liner laugh track react, one-liner laugh track quirky, one-liner laugh track. I could never watch it again after that. Story 5. They're not beloved by the general public, but are very popular with black people if that counts. Tyler Perry movies, any of them, all of his comedies are interchangeable. It's the same joke every movie that was already a lame joke before Madea became a thing. Story 6. Like many of the other comments, Big Bang Theory. I hold a special disdain for it whenever I tell someone I'm a physicist and their response is, "Oh, like Sheldon, I'm not mad that the show makes fun of scientists." If anything, I think they don't make fun of scientists enough. Nobody talks crap about physicists like physicists. The show just isn't funny. I take issue especially with all the sexism, and being called Sheldon gets old after a while. Story 7. Young Sheldon. Show is painfully cringeful unfunny. When my mom watches it, God, it makes me cringe. Sheldon is sufferably necessary for the plot, but the rest of the cast that plays off him is great, especially Annie Potts, who's wonderful as the badass Texan Meemaw. For those of you who don't remember, she was Janine, the receptionist in Ghostbusters. Story 8. Friends. There was a thing on the internet a few years ago where, TRO make a point, someone took the laughter track away from a friend's scene and placed it over the Here's Johnny scene in The Shining, then played both scenes. The point was made astonishingly well. I forget to mention that the scary music from The Shining was placed over the friend's scene. Story 9. Napoleon Dynamite. It came out when I was in 8th grade, and everyone in my class was all about it. All day, every day for weeks on end, they'd constantly quote it and laugh about how hilarious it was. When it came to Blockbuster, I begged my parents to rent it and we all watched it. I did not laugh even a single time in that entire movie. Not once, not even so much as a chuckle. At one point, I let out a single half-hearted ha at something. That was it. I was so mad. I'd spent ages having that movie built up to be the funniest thing anyone had ever thought of, and instead I got 90-ish minutes of stupid, weird cringe. I lost a ton of respect for my classmates after that, and remember genuinely wondering if they were just that stupid and immature that they thought it was funny, somehow. I ended up rewatching it years later because someone wanted to, despite my protests. It was still painfully unfunny, but at least that time everyone who'd been hyped to rewatch it realized it was crap pretty quickly. Story 10. Any of them that feature the lovable idiot or the dumb husband, smart, sassy wife. It drives me crazy when any show or movie gives merit to ignorance. Just because some moron on TV is funny doesn't mean it's funny or cute to be a moron in real life. Examples: Everybody Loves Raymond, Home Improvement, King of Queens. Also, Big Bang Theory. Another show that mocks intelligence and pokes fun at social awkwardness. Story 11. It's not beloved, but there is an infamous show that the BBC made. It was supposed to be a sitcom of sorts wherein Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler were a married couple in a neighborhood or apartment living next door to a Jewish married couple. Imagine if I Love Lucy was parroted by a bunch of wasted frat boys to something shocking. The show was made and went to air, but thankfully either mid-broadcast or the next day the BBC apologized and all subsequent episodes were shelved. You can find the pilot online on YouTube. It's called Heil Honey, I'm Home. Story 12. Any Disney sitcom. They're clearly made by adults who don't understand how children/teenagers work. And clearly cast actors that don't know how to act. And they're almost the same with the whole teenager who's ultra-talented singer/musician/dancer scenario. It's like they're trying to make Hannah Montana all over again because that was one of their biggest shows at the time, and even then that show wasn't even that good. Story 13. I'm sure Big Bang will be a common answer, but there are so many in addition to Big Bang. Has anyone here ever tried to watch something like Coach or Last Man Standing or George or any of Tyler Perry's dumpster fire sitcoms? There are a lot of horribly unfunny shows out there. I'm shocked that anyone still watches a run-of-the-mill sitcom. Story 14. Big Mouth. While I can get behind some crude humor, it just goes above and beyond. Yes, I agree these things need talked about, but I really don't think this is the way to do it. I think I'd like it more if some of the jokes didn't drag in annoying ways. Coach Steve and the senile hormone monster come to mind. Some of it is smart, I can respect it, but at the end of the day I just don't know who it's for. It's too vulgar for kids heading into or currently experiencing puberty, and the subject matter is too juvenile for those who have gone through it. Story 15. Couldn't get into Weekend at Bernie's even though I love 80s comedies. Never really cared for SNL, but I think the actors were pretty funny outside the show. I always preferred Mad TV growing up. Oh, and I'm sorry, but Airplane didn't age well in my opinion. I'm sorry, Leslie Nielsen. I tried so hard to get into Seinfeld, but I just couldn't. There are some funny moments, but I guess it's just not for me. My mom loved 2.5 Men, but I didn't care much for it. I agree with you guys that BBT is severely unfunny and should have never been on television. Men of Reddit, what do you think is more painful than childbirth? Story 1. I'm a burn survivor. In 1973, I was involved over 85% of total body surface. 15% of that total was third degree, meaning all layers of skin were burning. My shipmates put me out with a mattress cover. I spent the next 18 months in hospitals. After becoming stable, about 2 weeks, I underwent daily debridement of dead tissue. Lowered into a stainless steel T-shaped tank filled 1/3 with saline, the nurses cut away all the bandaging and then using scissors and scalpels cut away all the detritus. If you ever need to torture an enemy agent, burn the back of their hands till all the skin is black. Rip off all that dead skin and wrap the tissue in gauze soaked in sterile saline and wrap that in more cling bandage. Wait 24 hours. Dip the hand into salt water and remove all the bandage to the layer of gauze. Rip the gauze off. One finger at a time. I promise the agent will give you every truth he knows. Story 2. I had a pressure ulcer that went down to the bone after a coma, required many debridements to cut out slough tissue. One time they didn't adequately numb the area before cutting. The world went white and I wished someone nearby would stop screaming. A second later I realized it was me. Story 3. They have to push down on the mother's stomach after giving birth to get some of the excess blood out. Multiple times. Think CPR but on the stomach. My wife said that was 10x worse than the birth part. I'm going to go with that. Story 4. My wife thought the last month of pregnancy was worse than giving birth. She said giving birth was more painful for that day, but the constant tiredness and back pain was a worse experience for her. Makes me think of all those people, especially old people, with long-term ailments having to go on each day with pain. Story 5. Though I'd make that the last 3 months. I'm not looking forward to being old. I've had 3 kids now and the last few months are always awful. You can't do anything. My last pregnancy in the 3rd trimester, I got carpal tunnel, restless leg syndrome. My skin was itchy all the time and I couldn't stop clawing at it all night. I couldn't walk far and had plantar fasciitis. My back hurt. I couldn't breathe. I had to basically live on the toilet. My womb felt like it was going to fall out at any moment. Pooping was a nightmare as was reaching my ass to wipe it. I couldn't stop farting. I couldn't eat much. My appetite changed and I hated everything I normally like. My knees ached, high hips ached. My neck and shoulders ached. I couldn't get comfortable at all at night. Everything just hurt all the time. For 3 months. I really do not look forward to getting old. I can't actually imagine dealing with that crap for the rest of my life. Story 6. Acute radiation poisoning, the level that you get from holding cobalt-62 long, or what killed Daghlian and Slotin after the Demon Core incidents. Just watch Chernobyl on HBO and see what the radioactive graphite did to the firefighters that touched it. A quickly spreading burning over your whole body just to be tricked into thinking you're getting better for a few days, and then your body literally begins breaking itself down. Story 7. I imagine stillbirth would be even worse. Suffering the physical torment and with any mental anguish that's normal, but the emotional pain of stillbirth on top of that. Yeah. I imagine that to be quite unbearable. Edit. To any and all who do not agree with this position, try and remember one thing. The question posed what was more painful, not what was most painful. That's something of an individual perception that's hard to agree on, no matter who you are. Story 8. Kidney stones. I have a friend whose high school English teacher took leave for a few days to pass some kidney stones. When she got back, someone in the class asked her which was worse, passing a kidney stone or giving birth. Having experienced both, the teacher told the class that she would rather give birth to 9 babies simultaneously than pass another kidney stone. So apparently kidney stones are 9 times worse than childbirth. Story 9. Am I, a man, going to be the one to tell everyone that not all childbirths are the same? My soul was in active labor for 2 days after 2 days with constant contractions, often no break in between, and a step placenta. Had all kinds of complications and had to do surgery to remove the placenta and lost 2 liters of blood. It was horrific to witness. She can take a puck, but nearly passed out from the pain. I don't think a lot of things are more painful than this. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, popped the baby out in 4 hours, not even breaking a sweat. To her, a wasp sting is probably more painful than childbirth. Story 10. I used to work in a research hospital and would often ask patients to rate their pain on a scale from 1 to 10. We would say childbirth is about a 7 or 8, having a leg cut off would be a 9, and your whole body on fire is a 10. A minor pain, stubbing your toe, even if really hard, is about a 2 to 3. It always amazed me that people would come in with something minor like a sprained ankle and calmly state they were at an 8. Lady, an 8 is on the verge of blacking out. If you can take Advil and put ice on it, you're at a 2. Story 11. Watching my wife give birth in agony because the hospital messed up giving her any pain relief, then watching my first son born unable to breathe, having air forced into his lungs and being rushed out of the room to be worked on. He's 9 soon. Every time his breath lingers when I see him sleep, I remember the heat, the smell of the delivery suite, the bucket of adrenaline on an empty stomach. Even seeing that, and sat scared with my wife waiting for the worst news we could hear, I'd rather not feel the physical and emotional exhaustion of childbirth. I don't think there is anything more painful. Story 12. I'm an adult male who gets kidney stones somewhat regularly. Had them 6+ times in my life. Every time I go and someone tells me, usually a nurse or doctor, that it's actually more painful than childbirth. I watched my wife get induced and go through labor for 24 hours in order to give birth to our 9-pound son. No way would I ever pick childbirth. Give me kidney stones every day of the week. Story 13. According to a friend who has been pregnant several times, gallstones. My experience of gallstones is that, though they are excruciatingly painful, having a broken tooth was worse. So bad, indeed, that when the dentist thought they could not apply an anesthetic and proposed pulling it out without one, I was super keen that he go ahead, and in the end he was able to. I have no idea if either conclusion is correct. It is just what I was told. Story 14. Scaphism. Definitely scaphism. For those who don't know, scaphism was a torture method where you would be force-fed foods that caused diarrhea, and foods with high amounts of salt. While you were suffering from dehydration, they'd cover you in honey, and then tie you to the floor with very heavy weights, and let you be stung by ridiculous amounts of hornets and bees. The amount of sunburn will tenderize your wounds, and they would then put honey in these wounds. Next, ants would crawl in and eat the wounds from the inside. You would then be forced to stay alive by being fed milk and honey. More ants would then crawl down your windpipe and into your stomach. And your organs will become a beehive, hornet's nest, or ant's nest. Surely that's more painful. Story 15. The emotional instability of being forced to pretend everything is okay and to remain strong in the face of all problems despite your mental health being in the gutter, and to be expected to never reveal an ounce of weakness, or it'll cause problems for other people and make everything awkward. So you're just kind of forced to get through the day and cry in silent agony by yourself in the dark with no one to comfort you because they'll just think you're weird and or sensitive, which just leads to a cycle of self-loathing because you're forced to keep your depressive thoughts stuck in your head, which will remain stuck in there until the next day comes, and you'll be forced to put on a happy facade again in an effort to try and stave off the heavy burden on yourself for as long as you can before it inevitably comes back again.